Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da 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 ba da
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. Happy New Year! It's a new year! It's time for New Year's intentions. And I've decided to pick up some new skills via YTSU, YouTube
What?
Shorts University. I'm going to work on my gardening, my cake decorating, my resurfacing of repressed memories, my time travel, and why birds are a government conspiracy in our Creator Corner. We're talking to Chip Zdarsky and David Brothers about Time Waits from Distillery.
I'm excited about this episode for two reasons. One, we've already spoken with Deb Aoki and Christopher Woodrow Butcher of Manga-splaining on the podcast, and now here's Chip and David, and we get to complete the entire Manga-splaining package.
It's a royal flush or a full house. I don't play poker.
And two, when we recorded this conversation before the holidays, Lisa actually had an aggressive migraine.
I was in so much pain.
And Lisa was having a lot of migraines, and Chip and David offered to reschedule, but we were not confident that rescheduling would help because it would probably just land on another migraine day. So we had the conversation with Lisa in full migraine mode, and it unlocked something in you.
Yeah.
You got real deep, real philosophical, real quick, and thankfully Chip and David went there with us.
Generally I do the Columbo where I couch the tough questions with preceding more innocuous questions, but
no.
Migraine Lisa has no patience for that.
And then by the end, I mean, we are really exploring the universe in this conversation, which is appropriate with Time Waits and also entering the new year, 2025, a lot of anxiety. I feel like this is the perfect episode to launch our new season of Comic Book Couples Counseling.
2025, my year of I am already crying.
That's your personal slogan, mantra. I feel like our theme actually is comics will mend your heart.
That's right.
As we discussed in our end of the year episodes, our two-part Stampies, our best of episodes, we're really trying to engage with this medium as a doorway, one that we can walk through and see the outside world and explore everyone around us, but also a doorway that we can walk into and explore our inner lives.
And we invite you guys to do the same. This isn't like a original comic book couples counseling idea. We've seen so many other people do this with their platform, like Four Color Fantasies. They do their annual auction for literacy in the Winchester area, or Kat Calamia, how she organizes these anthologies for marginalized LGBTQIA plus individuals. Or Tiffany Babb, she's posting about her grant for people who are writing comics criticism. These are all people who are using the platform of comics to create the change they want to see.
Yeah, I think that absolutely falls under the banner, the umbrella of Comics Will Mend Your Heart. But the other type of activism I'm thinking about is when I am engaging with a book, I'm being active in that process. I'm being open and receiving of what this story can give me. And I think that's something that we've always preached on this show, but now I want to make it a little bit more of a mission statement. You know, in our preparation for the Stampies, we were reading all these comics, and I was reading Haru from Joe Latham, and there were these panels that were just jumping out at me and going like, this is speaking to what you're dealing with right now, Brad. These are affirmations here. These are lessons here. And all these stories, all these comics that we talk about on this show, they have something grand to give us. And I just want to make sure that I'm open to that grandness.
And when we find that grandness, we find that theme that is really talking to us, we share it, and we create a tool belt of hope and optimism and affirmations.
Yeah.
Art is activating. It's
Yeah.
a form of activism
Yeah.
if you allow it to be.
And so, like, one small thing we've done in the new year and towards the end of December is we've been using the hashtag Comics Will Mend Your Heart
Right.
and sharing panels from these comics, these little moments that have, like, really connected with us in our reading.
And we want to do that ongoing.
Yeah.
It's in the spirit of January. I'm a person who loves the idea of turning the page. It's January 1st, a new slate, you know? Like, I know some of you guys, you questioners, you rebels,
Who are you talking
you
about?
abhor the idea of New Year's resolutions. I've always loved it,
Yeah.
despite very rarely upholding it. And that's why we call them New Year's resolutions. Instead of calling it that, we call them New Year's intentions. There are things that we intend to do, because I've never been resolute one day in my life about anything.
So Comics Will Mend Your Heart, that hashtag, that's an intention that we're carrying into 2025.
That's right.
What are some other intentions that we've been talking about in the Love Nest?
Another is definitely to make more comics, or at least write more comics.
Yeah.
We have dipped 2 toes in. We have a toe in Pots and Panels, a comic cookbook anthology with our short story. We have another anthology, this one drawn by the amazing Scott Morse. This is so nuts.
Crazy.
It's This Ink Runs Cold. It's a series of one-pagers by different writers,
Brian Michael Bendis,
including
Stan Sakai.
us. It's crazy.
Yeah, hopefully both of those will come out in 2025. I know Pots and Panels will. I'm not sure about This Ink Runs Cold. You should head on over to Crazy Morse on Instagram and see all the one-pagers he has previewed so far.
And turn alerts on, because he goes live while he's inking.
Yeah.
And it is ASMR goodness.
Oh, I mean, it's a class in comics is what it is.
It's so good. So our intention is that every month we write at least 2 one-pagers. So at the end of the year, hopefully we'll have 12 stories we think are okay, that we can maybe commission some artists and make an anthology of our own.
You've already written one.
I have.
Is amazing. It's so good, guys.
It's a Christmas-themed story.
Yeah, hopefully we'll make something of it.
I hope so. Now it's your turn. You share another one of our intentions.
Well, we went to 31 comic book stores in 2024, and that was basically a result of all the traveling that we did. We went into 8 states and 1 nation's capital, and we tried to visit as many new shops as we could. And we're not going to be doing as much traveling in 2025, but we're going to be doing some, and we may be planning something pretty epic in July to coincide with Comic-Con. So I would love to visit 50 comic book stores in 2025. We'll see.
We're making pretty good time.
Yeah, we've visited, 4 shops already in the first week of the new year. We went to Comic Logic in Ashburn, Virginia on New Year's Day. We visited Barbarian Comics in Wheaton, Maryland, which is the oldest comic book shop in the DMV area. They've been around technically since 1969 when they were a bookstore, and then they rebranded as a comic book shop in 1973. And we also went to Collector's World in Annandale, Virginia, and we went to Big Planet Comics in Vienna, Virginia, which is our shop where our pull box is.
Though I'm not sure Collector's World counts.
Well, that's a good question. I'll put this to our listeners. If you don't sell any new trades or any new single issues, and you're only selling back issues and old trades, are you still a comic book store? Or are you a collector's store? And the comics in this store were really just like a corner of the shop. It's mostly like Pokemon cards, non-sports cards, but also like a ton of baseball and football cards and sports memorabilia in general.
I welcome anybody to weigh in on that, but I say we just hedge our bets and go like, well, if we've got 49,
Well, yeah.
we can round that up to 50.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. And what I like about this intention is you learn so much about this medium by visiting other shops and the people who sling those comics, right? And every store has a different vibe. Every store has a different philosophy about this beautiful medium. And there's just a lot to learn by talking to the people who are running these shops.
I definitely want to read more comics. Always more comics.
Hard to do, Lisa.
A little personal one. I've decided, I know in my intro I talked about YouTube Shorts University. I want to drop out. I want to drop out of that university. I'm trying to cut back on my watching of shorts because it's like a dopamine hit.
And
it's
that's
addictive
how
to me.
you go to sleep at night. Like, that's how you relax.
Watching 600 tiny videos.
Do you think you're going to read more in bed before you fall asleep?
I definitely want to do that. I'm not, it's something I've tried to do in the past and it has not worked. But that time where I want to stop just murdering time and trying to find more time to do things that actually enrich my life.
That's a good goal. It's a good goal. I mean, I personally want to do a better job of organizing our comics.
Yeah.
We have a lot of comics in this tiny little apartment.
And we buy doubles sometimes by accident.
Well, that's a mistake. Let's not shame ourselves, but also if we were a little more organized, that wouldn't happen as much. So that has gotten some focus in January.
We've been looking for more opportunities to just give books away. And in the past, we've just taken our big bags and gone from little library to little library. And we totally want to keep doing that because returning to one of those and seeing all of your comics gone is yum.
Yeah, and there's so many kids in this area. And we try to focus on giving kids comics to those little kid lending library areas. But we want to go bigger, right? We did this massive unloading of books after Christmas with these big book drops. But also there's children's hospitals that are always asking for comics. There's libraries, the Reston Library needs comics.
Yeah, and they do a sale every year. It would be fun to have a table at that library book sale. We can unload some of our books, share our love of comics with our community, and make money for our public library because we want people to read socialized literature.
Yeah. And then finally, just today, we donated all of our Patreon proceeds and everything that we made from our TeePublic sale in November and December to the Trevor Project. And it wasn't this massive sum, but it was a pretty good chunk of change. And I want to do more of that as well.
I think that should be an annual thing. November and December is the season of giving. You guys can help us pick a charity. And I think this community gives so much to us personally. It feels really good to use some of that to give back.
Yeah, 2025, this is how we fight back.
We actually donated that money on January 6th, which was a coincidence, but it felt really good.
It did. We do a lot of preaching. It's nice to actually practice.
Hell yeah. And for those of you who have been 15 seconds skipping, we are going to actually get to the interview at hand. It's happening now.
Yeah, Time Waits, written by Chip Zdarsky and David Brothers, illustrated by Marcus Tu and Marvin Sianipar, colored by Matt Wilson, lettered by Ariana Maher, edited by Allison O'Toole, and of course packaged by Tiny Onion Incorporated and published by Distillery. There's another intention that we have, Lisa.
Yeah.
We want to do a better job of crediting everyone who put this comic together.
If you notice a shirkin, feel free to call us out. Just be really kind because we are very sensitive.
The first two issues are currently on the stands, and the third and final issue will be hitting shops on the 22nd. The story follows Blue, who's a man from the future trapped in the past. That past is our present, and he has been here. He's been stuck here for 10 years, and in that time, he has developed a relationship with the local sheriff. Her name is Grace, and they are preparing to adopt a child named Duke. All Blue wants to do is tend his garden and love his family, but as a result of his time travel, he is experiencing these bizarre blackouts, and of course, the future will not let go of the past, and it comes rushing to meet him.
I frickin' love time travel as a story device. I will read or watch every single time travel story. And of course, it comes with these tropes and these rules. And it's really fun to watch how Chip Zdarsky and David Brothers kind of weave their way around those
and
tropes.
They create new tropes that
rules. I love rules.
I would like to see these carried over into other time travel stories.
Yeah, especially the one. that we talk about in this interview.
But let's not spoil anything. Let's let the listener enjoy where this conversation goes. And like we said, it gets pretty deep and philosophical. And our thanks to Chip and David for going there with us. And on that note, let's bring them into the Love Nest for a conversation about Time Waits. Chip, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We are stoked to have a fellow podcaster back in the Love Nest, and you have brought your cohort, David from Manga Splaining. David, welcome to Comic Book Couples Counseling.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me too.
Yeah.
So are we the couple that needs counseling this time?
That is, yes.
This is an ambush.
Yes. Yeah.
So we actually had Chris and Deb on the show earlier in the year.
Oh,
so it's nice to like actually complete the Manga Splaining quartet.
We've collected all the Pokemon.
All right,
Nice.
perfect.
I would love to know why podcasting together then forced you to become co-writers.
Forced us. Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, it felt like a natural extension because if you listen to our podcast before, and just so you know, your listeners know what I'm talking about, David and myself and the two friends mentioned, we do a podcast called Manga Splaining, where every week my manga intelligent friends educate me on manga, and we read a volume every week that they select for me. And so, kind of over the course of recording, like we've done 113 episodes at this point, something like that.
117 came out this week.
Well, yeah, 117. So we were able to kind of know each other better, not only just in terms of friendships, but in terms of our tastes. And a lot of times on the podcast, David and my tastes really lined up to the point where when I had the opportunity from Distillery, I was kind of batting around an idea, and I was like, "Oh man, this is like such a David thing that I'm thinking of." And then as soon as I thought that, I'm like, "Oh, maybe we should do it together." Because like David wrote a backup story in Newburn for me that Nick Dragotta, who's working on some sort of Batman book right now,
Yeah, some
Yeah.
side
We've heard of
project.
some side project. They did this backup story in Newburn, which was amazing. Like I've always loved David's writing, but kind of seeing him tackle like this crime comic was revelatory, and so it made a lot of sense for us to kind of have fun doing this together the way we're having fun doing the podcast. Does that sound right to you,
And
David? Am I leaving anything out?
no, I think you got it. Also, it's short, so if it wasn't fun, it'd be a very like in and out experience, you know?
Yeah, like our original plan was for like a 12-issue series, so yeah, that could have gone horribly wrong.
But our, I guess, vibe on the podcast is kind of, you know, Snidely Whiplash and Muttley from Wacky Races back in the day.
Sure.
We just trade off being Muttley is I think what it comes down to. So we like a lot of the same things, we have a lot of the same interests, but we kind of like different versions of the same things as well.
Yeah.
Like I'm very much like a martial arts movie guy and a crime movie guy, and like Chip likes people breaking up in New York City is his favorite genre of novel.
This is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So the our overlap is fun, but like where we differ is a lot of fun as well. And I think that co-writing is a good chance to kind of put our differences on the page in a way that's still like complementary, if that makes sense.
It does. Selfishly, Lisa and I would like to know how talking about manga, talking about comics on the podcast has influenced you as writers.
Oh man. I've been a comics critic since 2005, and I joke that basically it just made me really good at reading comics, you know, like pulling stories apart, figure out what's good or what's bad. And it's less about what's good and bad and more about like how you did it. Like what was the execution like? What were you trying to do and how close did you get to the target? And I think doing that with manga with Chip is sort of exploring something I know very well. Like I work in the manga industry. I've been reading them since I was a kid, but exploring it through his eyes instead of my eyes. So when he's like, "Oh, I don't understand why that we keep seeing all these stories that do X, Y, and Z," I'm like, "Oh, that's a manga trope that maybe doesn't carry over to a different audience." And so I think with things like that, you can kind of see like, what can we do to bring a manga vibe a little closer to a Western direct market vibe?
Yeah. For myself, the book that I'm currently writing and drawing, Public Domain, is directly from us doing the Manga Splaining podcast. Because one of the things I really noticed as we were reading a lot of books, especially early on, was just the defiance of genre.
Yeah.
Like there are categories kind of based on age, but we were reading books about like um food and visiting restaurants and like ping pong and like radio DJs. Like they all seem to be for the most part the interest of the creator, whether it's just like I'm going to make a comic about this. Whereas in
Hmm.
North American comics, and I use that phrase in terms of like Marvel, DC, Boom, Image, those kind of books.
Sure.
Um, they're very much genre focused. Like every pitch is like, it's cowboys, but what if they were vampires? Or it's Frankenstein, but he's a superhero. And like I've done it. Like I've got several books that would fit those categories. But it seems to be how it works here and how we sell books to audiences. And so for me, I realized I should make a book about the thing that I love the most. And it was a sad realization that it was comics. Like I had no interest outside of comic books, weirdly. All my friends have hobbies except for me, but my hobby is reading a lot of like old interviews with comic creators and reading kind of history books about comics. So I'm really fascinated with the industry stuff, and so that led to basically making public domain. So that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for manga explaining.
Do you
Getting
have
into
a? Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask
No,
if
you
you have
go.
a subscription to the Comics Journal archives, because if you love old interviews,
No,
dude.
I really should. Yeah. I only kind of like I used to read Comics Journal a lot, kind of in my 20s. So there were a lot of
Yeah.
kind of great interviews there, but I never held on to them. I kind of treated them as disposable, like a regular magazine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
same.
I'm in the process right now. I'm designing and gonna build a giant bookshelf in my studio because you can probably tell from the video I've got one bookshelf, which is at the max. So I haven't had a lot of room to get more reading material. So yeah, my hope is to kind of like build a library of that kind of stuff, like the physical copies of the old Comics Journal and
Oh, cool.
the Modern Masters, all the Tomorrow Publishing stuff as well, because I find those all fascinating.
Getting into Time Waits a little bit. I love where this story begins, where the characters we get to know are all in these places in their life where they're feeling super introspective, and they're at these places where they really are wondering about the meaning of life and what kinds of choices are they making to fulfill that meaning of life.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking particularly of Grace really desiring to become a mother, and Baker deciding to finally take on the family business. And of course, at the center of this is Blue, who is just trying to learn to like live in the present. And there's only 3 issues in this series, and I want you to talk a little bit about like using almost an entire issue to set up these ideas.
I've
Some
got
of
a
the
joke answer, but I want to hear Chip's like actual answer.
okay, good. Well, I mean, one of the nice things about the distillery format too is like that first issue is 45 pages
Yeah.
on oversized pages. So we had a lot of kind of space to develop the characters in that first issue and provide action, which is nice. Like I don't even know how we would do it in like a 20-page standard first issue, especially when we're dealing with essentially 2 main characters and 1 almost main character.
Hmm.
Not to mention Duke kind of as the observer of all this. So yeah, the space really helped in terms of kind of building up who the characters are and where they're at in their life. I think a lot of it is about comfort.
Yeah.
Like the characters, especially Blue and Grace, are at a very comfortable part of their life, and that can sometimes be a bit of a trap too in terms of like your forward momentum. Like, oh, this couch is comfortable. Like, why would I get up and do something? You can live the rest of your life just kind of in that space, which is there's nothing wrong with it, but Grace wants to push forward, and Blue's just kind of struggling to catch up a little bit because he's kind of getting used to this new life.
Hmm. For me, it's climate change. It's sort of, I joke that all my friends, all their books are about climate change in some way, but there's like
Yeah.
a wall coming in the future. And so it kind of forces you to think like, what am I doing now? What have I been doing? And what should I be doing? And I think a lot of that is reflected in the book. Like, real life anxiety is kind of filtering in that way. But I think with like I like that Grace kind of knows what she needs to do, and Baker has accepted a route that he's going on, and Blue is still
Yeah.
searching. I don't think we
Yeah.
were sitting down. We need like three perspectives on finding yourself, in the near future. But I think we kind of hit on something kind of fun there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think it worked out well that like, yeah, Baker's path was presented to him.
Hmm.
Grace's she is actively going towards, and Blue is in the
He's
moment.
on YouTube.
He's on YouTube learning how to garden. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
I would love to talk about that a little bit too, and maybe it's because this is how you all learn, and because you also contribute to this medium through manga splaining. But there's a lot of like information being downloaded via YouTube Shorts. The podcast, I believe, is manga splaining in the first issue, talking about
Yeah.
Chainsaw Man.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how information is communicated in this series through this new form, this new way of
Hmm.
learning?
Yeah, I think in the past, like growing up, I got a lot of that stuff from my grandfather. Like if something breaks in my apartment, my first instinct is to like get a wrench and fix it instead of calling the super who gets paid to fix it.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays I've been relearning how to draw after giving it up for years. And mostly it's like watching a lot of YouTube or, finding one person's blog that has a lot of tips or that kind of thing. We kind of get our information secondhand in that way. I guess it's still firsthand, but I don't know. It
It's
felt
first it's
natural.
firsthand, but
Yeah.
it's from a source that you don't have verification for, except for how many likes they've
Hmm.
got.
Yeah. There's no filter or, yeah, yeah, you got it.
One of my favorite things when I was a kid, when I was like 5 or 6, my dad built our home out in Alberta. And he was like a young guy in his 20s, and he knew roughly how to use tools, but he did it all himself. And I was like, how did you do that? He's like, well, I went to the library. I took out some books on some basic stuff like framing and stuff. And whenever I'd run into a problem, I would drive to a nearby construction site and I would ask the guys on the construction site. And then I would drive back to our plot of land and I would keep working at it. Like it's just such a fascinating way of working. And the fact that he pulled it off. Like
Yeah.
the house is still standing. I drove by it, last year when I was traveling across the country, and like such an amazing way to like kind of be on your own and also gain information.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's interesting the way people kind of take things in. Like I'm definitely a YouTube guy or a Reddit guy, weirdly. Like when my wife asks me a question or she's, struggling with something, I'm just like, well, just Google it. It'll there'll be a thread. Someone's figured this out. Someone knows this. Like she's like, oh, why is this happening? I'm like, put it in this machine we've got, and it'll tell you. Which is weird. It's a weird thing how quickly and easily, maybe that kind of lends itself to the comfort thing I was
Hmm.
saying before, just the ease of getting this information. Like the fact that like, we open essentially with Blue watching the video as he's doing the thing in the garden. Um,
Mm.
but then later on, he's getting firsthand knowledge straight from Baker for making the cake. So yeah, there's a progression there.
But I think a lot of it's rooted in learning things is fun or satisfying or whatever like personal adjective applies to you. Like
Yeah.
picking something up, getting it from a friend, or even just kind of like figuring out on your own. Like there's something really cool about that. And I think that's also a way that we find ourselves. Like what are
Hmm.
we comfortable doing? What are we like kind of led to do?
Yeah. I'm finding I struggle now the older I get with learning, and
Mm.
that's really frustrating. Like it used to be, if I wanted to learn a new computer program, give me 2 days
Hmm.
with like
Yeah.
a whatever Adobe Illustrator for Dummies book, and I'll figure it out. But now just I can't retain it. Like I'm having a real trouble. If someone puts something new in front of me, I'm just like, oh, I need to get a kid to do this because it sucks. It sucks getting older.
I was reading a few interviews with both of you talking about time waits, and one of the things I encountered was your love of this trope of the man with the dangerous past, the dangerous history,
Hmm.
and he's running away from it. And that is Blue in this story, but then with this time travel angle. Can you talk about your love of that particular trope and why you were attracted to subverting it in some way?
It's like the plot of all of my favorite movies, basically, and half my
Yeah.
favorite novels, I think. Like fundamentally, consequences are the best part of stories for me. Like someone does something and someone else responds. And in this case, someone has done something horrible or not great or whatever, and it's moved on and is trying to do something better, and it gets pulled back into that. So it's sort of like a moral test for the characters.
Mhm.
Kind of like, do you want to go back to the old you and become this monster again, or do you want to stay like Blue, the loving husband?
Yeah.
I really loved the John Wick series, like 1 through 4. And I loved 4 most of all. I'm not going to spoil the ending or anything, but it confirmed every like theory I had about the series, which is that it's fundamentally a tragedy. Like he suffers great tragedy in the first movie twice. He loses his wife and the dog, and he just immediately turns back to the only kind of problem solving that he knows how. And it makes his life so much worse. Like he goes through so much pain over like 6 months, maybe. And there's something fun, I think, about witnessing that, like seeing his struggle, wondering if he'll overcome it, wondering if he'll, sacrifice himself on this altar of like, I used to be the best and this is the only thing I know how to do, versus finding a new way. So I think like guy pulled back, or past reaches back to pull a guy, into that context again, is a very simple pitch, but there's so many angles that you can run with it. It's so fun.
Yeah.
Even something like, was it Long Kiss Goodnight with Gina Davis?
Yeah.
Yay. I love
Yeah,
that
like
movie.
super good.
For me, one of the great draws of this, this trope is the powder keg aspect of it.
Mm.
Like you set up and you talk about and you dance around the fact that this person can do something that other people can't. And you add in the moral conundrum of it all, which is always fascinating in a story. But to tease it out, and then to see the moment when that character is activated. I think one of my only regrets with Time Waits, I think that's partly because of the structure of the series, is that part of me wanted to maybe have Blue not do anything until that third issue, which
That's
was
hard
too.
mode. Yeah.
It's hard mode. It's hard mode. Like I did the series The White Trees at Image, which was like a fantasy series, which is also this trope. And the fun part of that one was like you don't see that main character, snap, so to speak, until
Mhm.
the end of the final issue. A History of Violence is like that too. Like you dance around Viggo Mortensen's character in the small town, like
Mhm.
he's got something in him, he can do something, and then when he finally does it, it's like so satisfying to watch, so
I think
satisfying.
Unforgiven is probably the king of that for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the Japanese remake and the American version both like absolutely nail that powder keg vibe. You're just like, these guys are screwed. Like they've pushed the
What's
wrong man too far.
what's the Japanese remake?
It's Ken
I think
Watanabe.
it's yeah. So
Oh,
it's
really?
set
Okay.
more or less in the same time, because when America was expanding into the West and kind of abusing the indigenous population, Japan was doing the exact same thing. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
almost a like not word for word, but it's like theme for theme remake,
Yeah.
say, just with
Okay.
snow instead of the desert. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Shockingly
gotta check
good
that out.
remake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite subgenres, I guess, is time travel movies, and particularly time travel where it creates almost like pocket parallel universes or whatever. And I think one of the concepts that's introduced in Time Waits that I think is like truly terrifying is this idea of, well, if we travel to the past and the past doesn't affect the present, then the people in the past kind of don't even exist. And that's used
Yeah.
as like an excuse to like just kill the most people you want, like the most
Yeah.
people possible.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the inspirations, perhaps some true to life inspirations, or just or fictional inspirations to bring that idea into your story?
I mean, there is a thing, like I've been reading a lot of nonfiction books lately, just history books, and
Mhm.
there's such a I was going to say trope, but it's history. It's not really a trope. There's such a thing where like
On historytropes.org.
yeah, yeah, people going to other countries and giving free reign to do whatever the hell they want because they're not at home. These people don't exist at home. Like so much kind of sanctioned murder has happened across the world because it's far away from home. So it doesn't matter. These people don't matter. Um, I'm looking at you, America. um, and then so there's an element of that here, and there's the knowledge of that time. There's no changing time. There's no changing the things that have happened. So if you go back and kill them, it was always meant to be.
Mhm.
And that is scary. Like, at one point, I think David wrote the scene of like the soldiers where where they kind of realize, oh, when you go back, like we can do whatever we want because there's no recorded history of us doing this, which means we got
Yeah.
Mhm.
away with it.
Right.
Like
Right.
knowing in advance you got away with something weirdly. Um, um, I don't think I've seen that in a time travel movie before, so that felt like a fun thing for us to introduce here.
Yeah, we really didn't want to have to ask ourselves if we got the time travel right at the end of the series as well.
Yeah.
And so avoiding like parallel timelines was sort of paramount almost.
Yeah.
And the line about already dead was, I got that from three different places, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
There's, yeah, it's like a small homage, I guess. There's the bit in Fist of the North Star where Kenshiro says, "You're already dead" to the people that he's fought as a way of saying, like, I've already beaten you. This is pointless, yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada. There's a bit in the Bible where Jesus says, "Let the dead bury the dead." That's kind of like separating the early Christians from the Romans at the time.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
And the David Bowie song, "We Are the Dead." Like there are all these different
Okay.
things that kind of position being dead as a thing that's not just like being under the ground, but like being apart from something else. And I think it would be cool if people from the future, well, not, cool, but it'd be storytellingly interesting if people from the future had kind of that nihilistic perspective on that sort of thing, where none of this matters, like Chip was saying,
Yeah.
because we're already here. Like these people already died.
Yeah. The time travel stuff was like we really wanted to lock that down before we start like
Yeah.
properly writing it because you really need to set the rules for that kind of thing to have it make sense. And I think that was the hardest part of the whole series, really. That kept kind of breaking
Actually,
our
yeah.
brains. Yeah, a lot of zooms where we would just stare at each other and be like, "But if this happens, then oh, just like
Yeah.
trying to work it out." Yeah,
But also like permanence, like the colonialism aspect, colonist
Hmm.
aspect, I think, becomes really clear when you have that kind of perspective from characters
yeah,
because they're basically pillaging the past. Like they need resources we have that they don't anymore. Like it's literally a colonization project, a resource
yeah,
extraction project.
yeah,
Yeah, and of course it gets us thinking of like all of the contexts in which we like we make it so that people do not matter.
Yeah.
I think in without speaking specifically about current events, a lot of people who don't matter, it's because they don't matter on paper,
Hmm.
and they go like,
yeah,
well, statistically, whatever. And
Yeah.
where I would like to go is like, when I think about time travel, I think about the ways that we actually like time travel in the present, and like going to back to that first issue and Baker saying like, okay, I have now made a decision in which I can see my future, and my future is I'm going to be running this business and I'm going to be running it the way my parents ran it until I am dead, Or
Hmm.
Grace going like, okay, I'm going to be Duke's
Yeah.
parent and I know that I can be a better parent than his foster parents and it's going to look like this until the end of my life. And then we see how much of that kind of future casting that makes a person feel so certain in their decisions is kind of um it's just a worthless thing to do. Like it creates just like another parallel universe in which I guess it's not worthless because they do ultimately end up pretty satisfied, which is kind of
mhm.
wild in a
Hmm.
3 issue kind of dark time travel story. Can you talk a little bit about like how thinking about time travel in this way has had you thinking about time travel in your everyday normal existence?
I
Yeah.
turned 40 like halfway through production. I think we
Oh
were
yeah,
writing, but it wasn't being drawn yet. And that's one of those
yeah,
things that's like, everyone's like, oh, you got to watch out for 40. And turning 40 wasn't so bad. But I forgot that everyone older than me also was getting older. And that's the hard part
Mm-hmm.
of
yeah,
being 40.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sort of thing where I'm like, I need to decide, like, I'm thinking about retirement seriously for the first time and taking care of my younger brother and sister who are, like high school, middle school age, that kind of thing. Like, just in case is on my mind a lot more often now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going somewhere with that and I lost it. So I'm just going to hand it off to Chip.
um, yeah. I mean, I think about time travel a lot in terms of like I am time traveling. I'm moving through time.
Hmm.
Every second is me time traveling. But over the past few years, I've really locked into the idea of memory and art being time travel. Like it's wild to me that I put a song on or a record on and I'm hearing the words of somebody that recorded them in 1976 or something like that. Like we're afforded the opportunity as humanity has been able to chronicle and create art, to time travel and learn from our mistakes and learn from the past. So I think about that a lot, especially in the current climate. Again, I'm reading a lot of history books, so a lot of this is me just being like, oh, this has happened before, or you can see things coming more clearly when you think about when you travel back in the past through the words that people have kind of put down when they've chronicled things, to see where you're going.
And I like what you said about the gap between plans and reality, kind of like what you want to do versus how it actually shakes out in real life. Because if you think about what you wanted to be when you were a kid and when you were a teenager and when you were a young adult, I feel like they might all be different things unless you're very, very fortunate, you know.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
I think trying to make a certain reality happen takes a lot of willpower and effort. And in this case, we've got characters who are kind of accepting or pushing towards that kind of effort,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Well, like what I like about, without going to spoilers, but what I like about how the story wraps up is, even though things didn't turn out how the characters expected, I think they all had the right to be really content with the decisions that they made, and knowing that they're the type of person to make that decision, they can still get that satisfaction even if things didn't turn out that way. But I like talking. So we talked about moving to the future. So I just want to briefly touch on moving to the past. So, like, one of the scenes that really affected me, Blue is having these flashbacks, traumatic flashbacks that are essentially time travel. He leaves his body to feel this memory. And while he's experiencing this memory, he's crashing the car. And I'm having a migraine day today. And like, migraines trigger panic attacks for me, which is awful. And so, like, literally, as I'm explaining to Brad, like, here are the things in the past that I have collected this past couple of weeks to have me crash my car today. Is this happened and this happened and this happened, and now I'm panicking about all of those things. Like, the past can be this beautiful nostalgic place to be, but it can also be a really distracting and hard place to be. Yeah, and in building Blue, and having him have these kind of blackout memories, did that trigger any kind of like ideas about having to coexist with not just your nostalgic past, but your negative past?
Yeah, you know the joke about like I'd love to time travel to the past and show my younger self this album or something like that. I think a lot of people would end up fighting their younger selves if they did that. If you've changed a lot from who you are, if you've made if you made a conscious decision to better your life or whatever that might mean for you, that necessarily means turning away from something that you have been doing or that you embraced or that you were stuck in, I think. And that's sort of like sprinting through mud sometimes, or maybe on beach sand. That's a better visual. It's like running on beach sand. Like you can get up to speed, but you always feel a little bit of drag behind you from what came before. And I think in Blue's case, like he's really feeling that drag in those moments because, he escaped from his past, sort of, scare quotes escaped from his past. And now it's all come crashing back. And he knows that this is bad. Like this is the worst possible thing that could happen to their family, above and beyond all the other worst possible things that could happen. And yeah, those sort of moments are paralyzing, I think. Because you're just kind of controlled by your panic in that moment. And the anxieties of what could happen, what has happened. And it's very rarely like, oh, maybe it'll be fine. Maybe I'll get there and it's just going to be a friendly visit from my old friend who just wants to meet my wife. But more likely it's going to be, the action movie thing for stories like this, not, in real life, I hope.
Yeah. I often think about that phrase that was it like worrying or anxiety is suffering twice.
Right.
Yeah.
I have this weird thing that both my wife loves and it drives her crazy, I think. And I don't know how it started, but I have a real life philosophy of the road not traveled would have killed me.
I like it.
Which is to say, like, and I think it started like in my 20s when like, oh, I think I had to work late one night, which meant I missed going to a party. But then at one point I thought to myself, oh, but like Shelly would have been at that party, and like I probably would have hooked up with her, and that would have been really bad. Like I just kind of came up with this whole thing of like the alternate reality where I ended up at that party and it went bad. I had a few kind of weird moments like that where the thing I decided not to do, I could later on I could see that it turned out horribly for that version of myself.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of became almost like a mantra. Like whatever I do is the thing that I should do. Like I'm guided by my sense of morals, my ethics for right or wrong, and on the surface it would seem like I missed out on an opportunity or something like that because I went this way, but ultimately no, like I'm fine, and I probably would have something would have horrible would have happened to me. I probably would have been assassinated or killed if I ended up writing Ultimate Spider-Man or Absolute Batman, both gigs that I turned down. That would have made me much wealthier than I am right now. You know?
I love the reverse anxiety.
Yeah. So I just like I let it go so quickly, and I have another thing too where I've kind of realized that anxiety, at least for me, is ego, because it's all about like how are people viewing me. Almost always anxiety is based on like, is that person mad at me? Have I upset someone? You know, can I get this done and satisfy those people in time or whatever it is? So once you realize it's kind of about ego, you can work on letting that go a bit more. Sorry, this is more of a therapy. This is actually a counseling
Yeah,
session.
now it's
but, like,
I
counseling.
love it.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
I
I'm
like
gonna
that.
try. Yeah, you go, David.
This is kind of related. Like your perspective is a little determinist, I think, in terms of like what you should be doing. And I adopted,
Yeah.
I guess, that for writing. Like I don't believe in writer's block. Like if I'm not writing well on something, then I'm writing the wrong thing for that moment. I should be writing something else. And that's something that's proven remarkably consistent in my life, like which I'm really grateful for, is if I'm stuck on a project, like switch to something else, like have another fire in the pan and move to that instead.
Yeah. It's funny that determinism, like, um, my other thing is that like between free will and kind of destiny or predeterminism, I've always just said like I have the free will to make the predetermined choice.
Yeah.
Like like that's ultimately what it is for me is I still have to navigate this ship, but those moves that I'm making are moves that are predetermined by my makeup, my biological
Yeah.
makeup, everything that I've been trained to think or feel over my lifetime. It's like, and I probably said this on our podcast before. It's just like having the infinite giant pool table in front of you with all these tiny pool balls. You still have to hit that. You still have to hit the cue ball, which is going to hit all these balls, and like that is predetermined. Like that is just math. Like it's going to spread this way based on all the angles, but you can't see it because there's so many of those balls. But
We got into
you still have to be the one that hits that stick against the ball.
we got into this a little bit with Baker in the first issue when he talked about
Yeah.
like fate and free will, which is like a misquote of an Invisibles bit where like there's no difference between fate and free will.
Yeah.
And I think reading that in my 20s like really adjusted how I saw, fate and free will both, like determinism, what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
Because like you still, like Chip saying, you have to make the decision. Like you still have to kind of show up for things to happen. It doesn't just happen without you, even if it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
we
was
put a lot
raised
of
with
anxieties in this book.
yeah, I was raised with the idea that you do have a predetermined fate and you can fuck it up. You know what I mean? Like you have a
same.
predetermined fate and you can really miss, which is a horrible. So I've gone like mentally, I've gone the opposite direction of I've actually made the infinity of choices, but this version of me can only experience one. So like if the smallest example is like, I picked something on off of a menu, even though there were two things I wanted to eat. Well, there's a version of me eating that other thing, but I only get to be like, this version of me only gets to experience one. But out there's a experience of me eating that other thing. Yeah, it does.
But it's so weird that that thing you didn't eat would have given you food poisoning.
Oh yeah, I would.
See, that's immediately where my mind goes.
Consistently.
Which is actually Chip, my biggest fear. So the idea of having food poisoning is my greatest fear.
Oh, well, this is the best conversation to have going into the new year.
Yeah.
I've eaten far too much pink chicken at Swiss Chalet here in Canada to be scared of food poisoning anymore.
Oh God. Oh God.
I've held onto that toilet bowl far too many times.
Oh, we gotta end this conversation now.
Sorry.
Chip, David, thank you so much for hanging out and talking Time Waits. Excited for the 3rd issue to hit soon. And yeah, thanks so much.
I keep forgetting that 3rd issue's not out. I keep talking.
Yeah, we finished it forever ago.
We finished it so long ago. I'm like, oh yeah, it's still got to come out. Jeez.
But no, thanks for having us. This has been great.
Yeah, it is a form of time travel. We know secrets of the future.
And
awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Note, I am going to hit off on the record. Aren't they just the best?
Yes, they are.
Again, the first 2 issues of Time Waits are currently available from Distillery, and the 3rd issue arrives on the 22nd, which is the future.
Ooh, we're time traveling right now, thinking about what that future is going to be like when we have all 3 issues.
And we have read the 3rd issue, and I really think the 3rd issue lands the concept. And as we spoke with them about in this conversation, this idea that the people of the future, the soldiers of the future, have no empathy towards the people of the past because they're dead no matter what. So we can just do whatever we want with these past people. That feels honest.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of potentially very sensitive but apt subjects in this. The idea of like, actually, evil corporations are creating our reality and they're seeing us as numbers on a page and all of that stuff. But I think it's also like, this book is a great reminder that even though we live in a dystopian timeline, it is so important to live your life and be an active part of the present, because it's the only time you get to be alive is right now.
I also really enjoyed where this conversation began with how their comics making has been affected by their comics podcasting. Mm-hmm. It did inspire me to finally catch up on the public domain, Chip's book, and man, is that comic great. Talk about something that falls under the umbrella of comics will mend your heart. It is so much about Jack Kirby and Stan Lee without being about Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. Yeah. This is an essential book for anyone who loves comics as an art form and as an industry. So if you haven't tackled the public domain yet, here's another friendly reminder to do so.
Yes, cosine, cosine, cosine.
And with that recommendation, Lisa, I think it's time to wrap things up and move on to our next episode, which will be happening next week. It is another Comic Book Couples Counseling comic book club.
We have not called them that before, but we're calling them that now.
New Year's intention,
Woo!
Lisa. We love this series from Mad Cave Studios so much, as well as creators Dave Chisholm and Rick Quinn. Spectrum #1 was a fantastic debut issue, and the 2nd issue is even better. That we are committing to 1 episode for every issue. These are deep dive conversations with the creators, exploring all the nooks and crannies of this parallel universe musical celebration.
But what makes these book clubs is that you can read along with us. So make sure that you add this amazing book to your pull list. You will not regret it, especially if you're a person who loves details.
And the idea is that you will contribute questions that we can also ask the creators as we have these conversations month after month.
Yeah, they'll be so fun.
And over on the Patreon feed, we have several other bonus interviews. We have a conversation with Ram V and Evan Cagle all about their New God series, as well as Jeremy Adams about Aquaman. And also we have relaunched our Married to Singles series, where we talk about the favorite single issues interviews of creators, and our first new episode of 2025 is Tyler Crook talking about Mage, the Hero Discovered, issue number 6, and you can find that in our Patreon feed, link in the show notes right now.
On January 26th at 5 o'clock new time, we've got another film club at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia, co-sponsored by Four Color Fantasies. We are screening, I'm so excited. Speed Racer. It's going to be so fun.
Yeah.
And we are instituting a little happy hour hangout afterwards. You can chill with us, get a cocktail, talk Speed Racer.
You know, before the movie, we do trivia and prizes. We watch this beautiful film, and then we're going to, have some cocktails and talk about this misunderstood masterpiece. Came out in 2008, the same year as Iron Man and The Dark Knight, 2 movies that radically changed the cinematic landscape. But we would argue that Speed Racer was the best comic book movie of that year. I was watching clips of it last night, and man, I freaking love this movie. We're hoping to also get a really cool virtual intro before the film as well. Cross your fingers for us. But this is how you kick off the new year. You kick off the new year with Speed Racer.
And if you're a patron, don't forget, you get into the movie for free. You just have to reach out to Brad and or Lisa. Do not reach out to the Alamo Draft House asking for free tickets. They do not like that. But if you reach out to us, we'll get your ticket. Okay, Brad, we better get out of here because you have blown out your voice doing the least. Where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on most social medias at MouthDork, although I'm spending most of my time on Blue Sky these days. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, send them to Jesse Lonergan at Jesse Lonergan on Blue Sky or on Instagram, Jesse.Lonergan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on some social medias. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you choose. We're everywhere. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
If you'd like us to touch you physically,
you
can wear our merch. tpublic.com/stores/comicbookcouplescounseling divided by hyphens. You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts, and if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show or leave a comment while you're there?
Yes, please.
We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
Doopy doopy bum 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 ba ba.
Are you frogging?
Yes. I wish our listeners knew how distractible I am, and Lisa has started crocheting.
They know.
And now, while she's podcasting, she's crocheting, and I'm trying not to look at her her non-idle deviled hands.
Well, because if I wasn't, so generally what I do when I podcast is tear pieces of paper.
I know, you're a fiddler.
I'm a fiddler. So if I wasn't crocheting, I would be doing something else.
And I'm not asking you to change.
Because I can't.
I'm happy that you're crocheting while I'm talking. And while you're talking, I love this new thing for you, this new craft. I'm just trying to find, I now have to develop a new way of podcasting.
Me?
Of ignoring you and your hands while I'm podcasting.
Yeah,
okay.
It does. I agree that, my winding, here I'm winding close to the mic, it does make a noise. So I can't wind.
It's not the noise. I mean, it is the noise because I'm also just so conscious of it because I'm the person who edits this thing.
Yeah.
But it's just seeing your little fidgety hands, just doing that same crochet motion over and over again while I'm trying to put a thought together. Anyway, I'm doing it.
You're just jealous.
I am jealous. I wish I was a crafter too. Maybe I will be someday. Maybe that's an intention. I don't know. Okay. Back to the podcast.
Oh my God. I would be so attracted to you if you also crocheted. I'm already attracted to you, but it would compound.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me work on other things first, and then I'll work on my crochet self.
Clearly not a priority.
If it'll get me more sex. Maybe I'll move that up on my intentions list.
I love the idea. Maybe that's a comic, like a crochet related romance.
All of this is a stinger, by the way.
Okay, this is really long.
This is how we're ending the episode.
I love that.
All right, what the fuck was I talking about? Okay, here we go. About where the conversation began.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.